I negotiate with my boss over my salary and pension, and the boss says yes or no. Government workers do that too. But their negotiation is a little different because their boss doesn't really pay the bill. Their boss is a politician who is likely to be long gone by the time, say, the bill for retirees' medical care comes due. The result is that politicians make so many promises to government workers, and as a result, cities in some states are trillions of dollars in the red. So where will tomorrow's politicians get the money to pay them, pay what they promise? Well, they'll hit you taxpayers, raise your taxes. And they'll probably stiff some workers. They'll say, oops, sorry, no more money left to pay for yours. You have to pay your own retirement or health care. Now, my favorite expert on this subject is Steve Malanga of the Manhattan Institute, and he points out that 2 states have made smart changes to prevent this pension bomb from going off. One's Utah, and their governor is Gary Herbert. So, Governor Herbert, what'd you do in Utah?
Well, number one, we try to think long-term in Utah. It's not just short-term, it is long-term for a lot of reasons. So we moved from a defined benefit to a defined contribution.
Oh, my God. Please. No, don't say those words. Steve uses them all the time, and they are very important. But I know you right now, when you hear defined benefit, you're switching off. So, I mean, let's try to explain what you're talking about, and maybe that will make it more interesting. So, defined benefit means you politicians define a benefit, and you say, this is what we're going to pay you in the future.
Could be retirement income. You're going to receive some kind of insurance policy, some kind of guaranteed benefit you receive after you retire until you die.
We promise you. As opposed to what, Steve, you encourage states to switch to is...
Well, he used the term defined contribution. It's also typically called a 401k.
Okay.
Right? And that's where you define what the money is that you're going to give the employee in an account so that they can have it towards their retirement, and they build that up over the time. But once you make that contribution, the taxpayer's liability ends at that point. It's not unending.
And you as the worker, it's not like Social Security or Medicare, which is also a promise. This is real money. Money is taken out. There is actual money in your account.
In your account, absolutely, yeah.
And so it's not subject to the whims of politicians, while the other one is just a promise. Hot air, I would say, and there's a good chance over time that there won't be the money to pay it.
Although I would say that the hot air is actually a kind of risk for taxpayers, because in many states, courts say this is guaranteed. So if you come up short over 20 or 30 years, it's the taxpayer who has to make it up. And we're already seeing tax rates go up around the country, at least in part because of this obligation that politicians have not followed through on.
But Rhode Island, which had $6 billion in unfunded liabilities, made a change, went to $3 billion. Utah also, these 2 states. And workers get mad? Workers not like it?
You know, in the beginning, there was concern about what am I losing? And of course, we explained to them, unless we make some changes, the system will in fact go bankrupt, and those who are entitled to the benefit will not receive it. The young people coming in, the new employees, could bankrupt the system. So we end up having a 2-track system to kind of keep our promises to the first ones that have a defined benefit, but give choice to those who are coming on board to get it back to actuarially sound.
And in Utah, your pension system was already in such good shape that all you had to do was make a new deal for the new employees. You didn't have to mess with the old plans.
That's right. We were about 100% before the Great Recession hurt. And, you know, as you invest and funds grow and diminish, but this was such a great diminishment of overall money. We lost about $6 billion. We had to take corrective action to make sure that it stayed actuarially sound and, in fact, did not, in fact, become a boondoggle for the taxpayer.
All right, Steve, but Utah is the exception.
Oh, absolutely. Public employees tend to resist any kind of change. They do so in part because their union leaders tell them that 401k style plans don't work, even though, for instance, I'll give you an example. Among teachers in America, 50% of teachers in America leave the profession within 5 years. If they had a 401k, they would take all their money with them. But in a defined benefit plan, you get very little if you leave and switch and go to another job. So basically, this kind of plan is perfect for people who are going to stay in government for their entire lives. Yes, exactly right.
But it's awful for the taxpayer, and the unfunded liability at the moment is $4.5 trillion, up from $2 trillion just in 2008.
Yes, it keeps rising. Here's the thing. This is the irony. 40 states say in the last 2 years they have done reform to their pension system. Yet the liabilities, the debts, that's what they are. The debt keeps growing because most of the reform is extremely superficial.
Unions scream when...
Oh, well, they fight this tooth and nail. This is.
Well, I would think they would like to have their own pot of money to hold on to.
Well, I certainly would like to have my own pot of money to hold on. On the other hand, if I were a worker in California and I had a system where after 30 years I could retire with 90% of my salary, which is what you get in California if you're a public safety worker, boy, I tell you, I'd opt for this too.
All right, private sector unions don't get away with this. They can't have unfunded liabilities. Why? What's the difference between the private sector and the government?
Competition. The thing is that first of all, there were a lot of about 50% of private workers at one point had defined benefit. Companies, however, started going bankrupt as a result of this. Companies had huge costs as a result of this, so they switched. And unions tried to resist, but in a competitive marketplace where you're in the private sector, you can go out of business. The difference is that government doesn't go out of business. Instead, the taxpayer is the backstop to all of this, and that's part of the problem.